It's really lovely to be here, and what a privilege to be speaking here with my fellow panelists and to all these wonderful women in front of us. So, Carol, I think, living in Sub-Saharan Africa, women face a number of barriers, socio-economic barriers. I think firstly, one would be financial exclusion. We live in a continent where more than 55% of women have no access to formal financial services. That means they don't have bank accounts. They can't transact with any other means of payment other than cash. So that's a big struggle, because we are living in a time where it's so important to have some form of financial inclusion and participate in the formal economy, more importantly, in the digital economy. We also have things like women not having much land ownership. So in Sub-Saharan Africa, less than 20% of women own land. Earlier on, a speaker, Gwen, spoke about some of the barriers, like women not being able to inherit land, for instance. And we know that this is one of the things that is important for raising capital that can be used as collateral. So without land ownership, again, that's another barrier for women to participate formally. The digital divide is another one where women don't have as much access to digital internet connectivity, for instance. Again, another statistic shows that women across Sub-Saharan Africa there are about 35% women across Sub-Saharan Africa who have access to the internet. That means that some of the tools and services that can be accessed online are not available to many women. So, these are a lot of challenges that we recognize as Visa, and we work with partners to try and address these, because we believe collectively we can find solutions to some of these issues, which are also then further exacerbated by cultural norms where we find women, although sometimes working and participating in the economy, still have to spend a lot of time doing domestic work, looking after children. So those are societal norms that require women, or at least expect women, to participate in those kind of activities more than men. Thank you.
Lerato, you're from the South African Reserve Bank, so we're going to ask this question again. How can we bridge that gap in terms of access to finance for women entrepreneurs?
Thank you, Carol, and good morning to all the change makers in the room. I think a lot of it Gwen touched on earlier on in the discussion. But I think that some of the most important things that we need to realize is that traditional banking methods, as we know them, are not serving a continent that is growing so exponentially. One. Two, we have these cultural norms that Nono is talking about that are an impediment. And the going conversations are, for example, around things like financial literacy. And we've got to debunk the myth that when women get into business, somehow they must be upskilled, somehow they must get the training. And there's a natural assumption that men come into financial services or are financially literate naturally. And so financial literacy is absolutely critical. Education is absolutely critical. But as Gwen said, it starts in school, right? And so the innovation around banking products, mobile banking, etc., will come from those communities and those individuals that are excluded or underserved by the banking system. And so the example with M-Pesa, examples such as e-walleting and those methods, that do not forget that remittances that go into rural communities, those remittances that come from overseas, from people who are working in London, in Abu Dhabi, or in South Africa, taking money to Zimbabwe, necessarily requires a very different mindset. And so it is through technology that we're going to find our solutions. But it is also through a gender lens, a lens that says, who am I servicing? What products and services are they buying? Where are they buying from? And create a change in how we service women who come into the banking system. We make it less intimidating for them, and which is why the digital financial systems are so attractive, because there's no one who's going to be looking at how you're dressed, whether you look like you actually do deserve a fund or funding or a loan. But it is based on very little compliance around paperwork. It is you, your phone, your room, a selfie, and off you go. And so even when we talk about the fourth digital transformation, fourth IR rather, I think that Africa is seeing this leapfrogging into the future before everyone else, especially around finance.
Margaret, can we talk mentorship, peer networks, role models,
Yes.
and how these support the success of women entrepreneurs?
Well, as you know, I'm passionate about women. I've always been passionate about women and about women empowerment. But I'm going to ask all of you a question. Now, I'm actually going to ask you two questions, and Laneshri gave the answer to the second one. So the first question I'm going to ask you is, what's the difference between a clever man and a stupid man? And the answer is, there's no difference. They both think they're fantastic. Okay? Then what's the difference between a clever woman and a stupid woman? There's no difference. They both doubt themselves. And ladies, until we get over that self-doubt, we will never get anywhere with anything. You can have everything you like, but you've got to get over that first. It all starts with you and building your own self-confidence. And you can do this through mentorship. And that's what we do at Hirsch's. We do, from the really basic, we bring in domestic workers and I teach them computers so that they can upskill themselves and get better jobs. We bring in small businesses where they can't understand the language you talk. You don't understand when you talk this language. The woman in the street doesn't understand it. We bring them in where they compare each other. They work with other women who are in business and they build themselves up slowly because the leap from where they are to where they have to be is too big. It's taken me 45 years to build my business, and I started with nothing, and I'm handing over a multi-billion-dollar business to my children. But it took a long time to build those bricks, and I think everybody wants to get from zero to hero in one flash. It doesn't work like that. You've got to work harder on yourself than you do on your job, and it will come automatically. Chasing the money and the finance and this and that doesn't work. Build yourself up first, build your own self-confidence, and as your self-confidence builds, so your bank balance grows.
Nono, again, financial literacy programs. Can we talk about the importance and how it is that they empower women to make these informed financial decisions?
Financial literacy programs have been such a transformational tool for women, particularly in areas that are more rural. There's less education, there's less awareness of, what it means to, do things like budgeting, saving, how do I invest. And so we have financial literacy tools, even at Visa, that we use to help support small businesses. So we have something called Practical Business Skills. It's a very simple resource that can be accessed online, via a cell phone or a computer. Teaches financial skills, teaches how to start and run a business. With the right level of financial management, but also how to integrate digital payments tools into your business. So again, we believe that financial literacy also helps small businesses particularly become digitally enabled. Digital enablement has also then, helped businesses grow in leaps and bounds. In the last 10 years or so, we've seen big strides happen in how people are transacting and how people are selling their goods and services. And we've seen e-commerce transaction also, pick up at a high pace. During COVID, there were statistics that said that people or entrepreneurs whose businesses went online and, were able to trade on e-commerce platforms had a higher rate of survival, and those businesses are still operational even today and have even scaled. So financial literacy helps, business owners with, financial management, but also helping them scale their businesses. This also then increases employability and growing, creating jobs. We live in a continent where there's a high rate of unemployment, so having the right level of skills helps entrepreneurs grow their businesses, create employment, and also just become more sustainable, contributing to economic growth, contributing to the GDP of economies. So there's so much value in financial literacy and financial literacy programs.
Mm. Margaret, you spoke about starting your business 45 years ago. Can we talk about gender norms, cultural norms, inheritance laws, and other legal structures that really impact women's abilities to participate in the economy?
Well, for a start, I think that women have to think of themselves as people. They don't have to think of themselves as women, and they must never compare themselves to men. I think if we can get rid of the patriarchal society, especially in this country, it'll go well. I've never asked a man permission to do anything, and I never will. So I think that's really, really important. Don't ever think you've got to ask permission, and don't start every sentence with sorry. Okay, because it just pulls you right down. So I think we've got to think of, I think of myself as a powerhouse. I go into any meeting, and I'm usually the only woman in the meeting, and I go in strong. I actually know that I'm stronger than any man there because they've never been through what I've been through. So why should I worry about that? And my goal in life is to have every woman financially independent, because a financially independent woman is strong. She can make her own choices. She doesn't have to be with a man if she doesn't want to be there. She can educate her own children. She can build her own house. She can drive her own car. She doesn't have to ask permission from anybody to do anything. And I think that's what every woman should be aiming for. Now, how do you get there? You get there by, first of all, making money. How did I start my business? I had nothing but my brains and my two hands. That's all I had. I had no family to fall back on and absolutely nothing. And I start all the women that I start in business, I say to them, all you need is your brains and your two hands. From there, you can build up and you can do whatever you want to do. But you have to have a goal, you have to have a mission, and you have to work really hard. But I think the biggest thing is to invest your money back into your business. What do people do when they start earning money? You see them buy the fancy house, the fancy car, the nails, the hair, the whole story. You can't do that because you've got to invest. And never was it, and I invest in property, I believe in property because there's only so much and it's always going to go up in price. So I invested in property, and during COVID, when they closed us down and we were closed for 6 weeks, I had a huge salary bill to pay, I had huge creditors to pay. I could not have done that if I hadn't invested in property, because I drew on my access bonds, which were paid off, to carry me over that hard time. And I always say to all women, you've got to have 2 streams of income. You can't just have one. And all my staff are encouraged to have 2 streams of income. They all have 2 jobs. Because you can't just have one job, because if the wheels fall off that job, you have to have something to fall back on. So even with my cashiers, they do Tupperware, Herbalife, all those type of things. Some of my sales staff MC at weddings. They have 2 streams of income, so that if one falls back, you've always got the other to fall back on. But for women, I say investment is the most important thing, because if you invest your money, you can build up, and then you can make the decisions. You don't have to ask anybody to make a decision. And I think every woman here must when you get home, take your old lipstick out and write on your mirror, I am enough. You know you are enough, you're strong enough, you can do anything, and you've got to get over yourself if you want to get ahead.
Oh, yes. Lerato, can we talk about innovative financing models, microloans, venture capital? Which of those are most effective?
I think it depends on the context, right? And it depends on what business you're getting into. A lot of women oftentimes get into very sustainable businesses. Women build. So the businesses are going to be around community and what the community needs are. And so therein lies the opportunity. So if there's an opportunity to build a road, they'll get into infrastructure. But the question is, why are women not in those spaces? Not enough women are in those spaces. Partly, it's a big thing around what Margaret talks about, self-doubt. So even before they get in, there's already this, maybe this is not for me, maybe there are other people that this is meant for. And so we must, again, work on ourselves to say, it's as much an opportunity for me as it is for a guy. So, and the financing will depend on what that is. And I think South Africa, for example, sits on a huge opportunity around infrastructure funding. And there's opportunities, again, for blended funding between the private sector and the public sector. The private sector tends to think that it's the job of government, right? And part of the problem is that some of the people that were in government and go into the private sector still have a government mindset. And this is where the opportunity, again, to bring in more women who have an understanding about the requirements for the type of funding that's required comes in. So whether it's private equity, whether it's blended financing, venture capital, women require to get into businesses where there's patient funding because we build for the long term. So we need patient capital that's going to see us through all of those cycles.
Nono, talk to us. We're talking about the digital economy now. The role that digital financial services and mobile banking, their role that they play in improving access, in particular, for women, especially in those rural areas.
Yeah, and I think in the last few years where we've seen a lot of innovations around digital financial solutions, mobile banking, we've seen how these platforms come in at a cheaper rate, so they're more accessible in terms of cost. So where you find in a lot of our communities across Africa, there isn't a lot of access to physical banking infrastructure, so you don't have bank branches everywhere, and so people would have to commute from a village or township, etc., to get to a city to do banking. These mobile digital banking services make it easy to access credit as well. So through credit scoring, that can be done also via online platforms. Women are able to access credit. I think, as Lerato said, there are many different ways of financing businesses, and so you can find microloans, etc., that women can apply for on a mobile banking app. We've also seen a big shift in some countries across Africa where mobile money is also quite big. So we have a partnership with, say, M-Pesa, and through that we've reached more than 20 million women across Africa, mostly around East Africa, but this has given them access to digital financial platforms that they didn't previously have access to. And so, they say that also the more women are able to manage their money, whether it's, virtually, digitally, the more they're able to make decisions around, it's my money, how do I use it, how do I budget for it, as you said, Margaret, not always having to ask for permission in those societies where men still play a big role like that. So I think that fast-tracking of digital financial services has really had a big impact on women and how they are accessing money and transacting across Africa.
All right, great stuff. A round of applause for all of our panelists, ladies.